Good morning, everyone. Mike here from Safeguard Solutions. Welcome to another episode of Wired for Wellness. I'm here today with Drew Meyer. Drew, how you doing this morning?
Good, Mike. Glad to be here.
Good, good. I'm glad. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back again. This is your second time back on the show, and today we'll be talking about everything building biology, EMFs, construction. Drew, I know you're a big construction guy, so we always look forward
Yeah.
to learning about best building practices and anything else that you want to share in terms of healthy homes. So, Drew, tell me how you been.
Absolutely, Mike. Glad to be here. I've been great. We've been in the process of doing a remodel on our office, our medical practice, and we're just getting to the tail end of that. So it's been really fun to implement a lot of these practices, procedures, finding the right materials for our office remodel. I know I've reached out to Mike a couple times asking, hey, what should I use for this? What should I use for that? And happy to say, it was a learning experience, but we got it all done. It's all EMF blocked, hardwired, um, all non-toxic, zero VOC paint. So
Amazing. That's great.
feels good to get it
Yeah.
to the finish line.
Absolutely. Honestly, Drew, the best way to learn is by doing. And, when I first started, my mentor had told me that, you are going to learn everything by doing. The best thing to do is start with your own home, right? Make your own home as healthy as you can make it. And that's exactly what I did. We have a cell tower right behind our home. So the first thing I did was we did all the EMF paint. We did the curtains. When I go to clients' homes, I always say the best thing to do first is to start from inside of your home, right? Because there's a lot of sources from the outside of your house, right? Like say cell towers, smart meters, neighbors, modems, stuff like that, that do present signals. Depending on your situation, it could be radar as well, right? Coming into the home, but there's also a lot of stuff inside the home that creates a lot of radiation as well. That people don't realize. You hear about all the bad stuff like with the 5G and the cell towers and the small cell antennas, but we don't recognize what's going on inside our homes. And I think that's where I like to start when I'm doing assessments is start from the inside of the home. Clients, when you point things out, they want to make the change. I think a lot of times they just don't know how. So we provide them with, solutions that will help them to decrease the amount of radiation that's going on inside their homes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Drew, I think a lot of people, I think the EMF stuff is something that is pretty easy to kind of understand and grasp through reading or through talking or watching videos. But what I think a lot of people don't get is all the other stuff. I mean, you talked about this in the first episode about healthy building materials, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you think the best practices are for building and building with healthy materials? And then we can expand on that into like building with some EMF products that are good solutions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just starting off with something I think that, everybody's either renting a house, living in a house, one of the most applicable things people should know because most people have the capability to paint and really doing research on what paint you're putting on your walls. There's a lot of great products out there. AFM Safe Coat is one. Ecos paints another. I think Artemis. We're getting a lot of these zero VOC paints that are truly VOC, even down to the pigments,
Yeah.
because that is kind of a notorious issue. Is the base might be zero VOC, but then they add coal tar pigments for the color. But certain lines, even their pigments are zero VOC. Ecos is one of my favorites. I know, Mike, I think you recommend AFM Safe Coat. They're kind of the OG, and their products are really solid too. They're probably considered one of the best. They make
Yeah.
everything from, air purifying paints, specialty finishes. They even make like caulking, silicone, sealers, glues. So they're a really, really great company. And one of the biggest sources in your home can be from your paint, stains, and finishes. So it's something easy to do and change out. If you would have, I was just talking to a store owner yesterday. They bought a bunch of melamine slat wall for their showcase, and it looks great. It came from Taiwan. Well, we all know that some of these countries don't abide by CARB 2 phase compliance. So he said the formaldehyde, when he opened the boxes, his whole shop just reeked like formaldehyde. So now
Wow.
he's in the process of taking them out, off gassing them, and I think he's going to use AFM Safe Coat to seal them, or seal coat. But it's things like that where you can really limit the chemicals that you're bringing into your home. Same with flooring options. That's a big one, whether it be carpet, resilient floors, so popular now with LVP luxury vinyl plank. It's a vinyl based product, but it's full of forever chemicals. And with phthalates, those never stop sloughing off. And how often do you walk on your floor barefoot? Well, what happens when you're constantly walking around, or let's say you have a young child crawling, hands and knees, and then puts their hands in their mouths? We know those endocrine disruptor forever chemicals are, you know, contributing significantly today to all the hormone imbalances we're seeing in both male and female, young and old. I mean, it's really been an epidemic of these endocrine disrupting chemicals and fertility rates. Not only do we have that, but then you add on, the EMF, which is another, anti-fertility component. And Mike's obviously the expert on the implications there, but
Yeah. No, it's I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Is like for clients, we are working with them to I do a lot of air quality testing for clients. And the first thing that we look at is formaldehyde, VOCs, and particles, right? And I mean, we measure the micron size particles as well as like the PM2.5 and PM10. And this stuff, it can be severe irritation to a lot of people, with their eyes, nose, throat, and lungs, right? And some people are more sensitive than others, for sure, right? And so it can, you know, it can also create respiratory issues as well, right? You can take somebody who's perfectly healthy, and if they're put in the wrong environment for a long period of time, right? It can start to deteriorate the body, and respiratory issues start to happen, and you get the itchy eyes, and get this wake up in the morning with the stuffy nose and the scratchy throat, and a lot of people for a long time they just don't know what's going on, right? They don't know what's happening. They don't know, I mean, there's a lot of practices that are there in place, something as simple as cleaning your ducts, making sure you're using a HEPA vac filter on the furnace, these types of things. And you walk into some people's homes and you ask them, like, when's the last time you cleaned your ducts? I haven't cleaned my ducts in 5 years, 6 years, right? Well, that's a big problem right there, right? Because there's a lot of dirt, debris that builds up in these ducts, and if they're not cleaned out, you're blowing that all throughout your home, right? And you know, I mean, there are certain people, individuals that are a lot more susceptible and sensitive to um, particles, right? That are floating through the air, and that's something that people need to. If we keep up with the maintenance of our homes, it could help to steer free and clear of a lot of these issues. But that's not always the case. People don't always have the time. You get the people that they're constantly working, working, working. and they don't have time, right? They just, it is what it is, and you have to respect that as a professional and help them walk them through it and explain, this is what I think you should do, and here's why, and this will improve the situation, and go from there with it. And hopefully they're open to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Drew, story
Yeah,
time.
interesting study. What's that?
Oh no, I was gonna say story time. Tell us,
Oh, yeah, go.
no, for you. Tell us a recent story, or experience that you've had with a client, that is interesting and has shown you, some success to what it is we do.
Um, so this pertains to even me recently here in Nebraska. I think we're ranked 4 in the country of highest radon. And a new build right now, if you build a home, most jurisdictions from being in the construction field require a radon mitigation system into the slab, passive system, and amongst contractors, it's always laughed at, like, oh, radon, that's just some crazy thing. It doesn't really matter. It's a hoax or fake news or whatever.
No, it's
And
not.
before getting into building biology, I didn't realize how much research and science was behind radon and the link to cancer, because it's like not talked about here in Nebraska. No state
Yeah.
resources, no education. And my grandma uh, got lung cancer, and she never smoked. And it was really interesting because I'd kind of had all this realization, and we went into the doctor, and it was an appointment, and the doctor goes, "Oh, I see here you had lung cancer," and he goes, "You don't smoke?" "No, never smoked." And he goes, "Oh, so just unlucky then." Well, she lived in a home that never had full basement, never had a radon mitigation system, so it's
Yeah.
likely that she was just exposed to incredibly high radon her whole life. But it shows you even an oncologist living in Nebraska didn't put 2 and 2 together. Instead of saying, "Oh, have you ever had your radon levels checked?" Instead, it's just, "Oh, you just must be unlucky." So it just shows you kind of how we're really dropping the ball, um, as far as getting the word out, educating people. It's something simple you can do. Now the meters are really affordable, and it's been really shocking. Even if it's a slab on grade structure, you can still have really high radon levels. You don't just, it's not just from basements. It's essentially soil gases, the uranium that breaks down and, just comes up through any crack in concrete that you may have. And then, your building's contained. So unless you're airing out your air, those radon particles will float in the air. They're just the same buoyancy. So they hang in the air, they mix with dust. So you can really have a problem if you're not, measuring and really airing out your home regularly. And also, you should have a minimal passive radon mitigation system.
Yeah, 100%. Drew, I'm glad that you're talking about this, because this is definitely something, and I push really hard on clients to bring awareness to this, because I think that, for the cost of testing, like down here, we have a short-term and a long-term test that we use in everything. I know you can buy the meters. I try to stay free. I try to stay clear of that. I use a lab generated test. And the lab will actually tell us what the results are. That's what I like about it. It's not something that's just a meter. It's not mechanical. You don't have to worry about calibration, nothing like that. It's more along the lines of, submit it to the lab. They give us the results, and then we decide if we need to do anything further from there, right? A lot of times we don't, right? But there have been a few cases where it comes back as being, elevated or slightly elevated or close to it, right? And with any short-term test, I always recommend following it up with a long-term test, right? Simply because of the fact that a short-term disadvantage to doing a long-term test is that it is long-term. You're not going to get your answer for up to a year from now, right? So I always say, let's start with the short-term test, because, the long-term tests run anywhere from 3 to 12 months, right? Short-term tests, we run it for from 48 to 72 hours. And then we usually have our results back within about a week or two, right? Now I always say that, I mean, they are accurate, the short-term tests, right? But the long-term tests are more accurate because it's spread out over a period of time, right? Best thing we usually tell clients is to do it during the winter season, right? Through the heating season, because that's what they say they find radon to be the most prevalent is during those times, in those periods. So that's where the long-term test comes in, right? Obviously the advantage to the long-term test is that it's more accurate. The disadvantage to it is that you got to wait so long to get your answer. It's the opposite with the short-term test, right? The short-term test, you get your answer right away, but we like to see it go through several different seasons so that we can kind of pinpoint exactly, over a period of time. So I like doing both. I like starting out with the short term, moving into the long term if necessary, and also if the customer is open to it. But I agree with you. I know in the US, I think if I remember correctly, I remember reading that you can't buy or sell a home without a radon test. Is that correct? Or have you heard the same? Yeah.
Well, I think it's
So I mean,
like a 24-hour test.
yeah, yeah, and I think I think that's a great practice. Right? It's the same thing,
Yeah,
and
it's a good start.
real estate agents don't usually like these things because they're deal breakers, right? They're deal killers, right? So, I mean, that's one of the hiccups, right? And it's the same thing. I think like a lot of the agents that I work with, they're pretty good in terms of um, letting doing what their client wants, right? Eh, You know, for somebody who's buying a house, I think that there are a certain line of tests that you really should do before purchasing the home, right? I think that
Yeah.
there should be a mold testing done, right? As a home inspector, when I walk through a home, I'm always looking for areas of concern in terms of mold. But a lot of times mold, I've been in fully renovated homes where you would never guess. I just did a basement apartment for a client a few weeks ago. And this home, the basement was just renovated after having a sewage backup, a flood in the basement. And they had brought me in to just do some clearance testing. And Drew, you wouldn't even believe it. The levels that came back after renovation, after putting down the new floors, after putting up the new drywall, after painting, right? Um, Now, I mean, clearly there was no remediation done prior to this because there's no way that you can get these kinds of levels with, I think it was Calatosporium, um, when when like after doing a remediation. I just don't see how, right? So, I mean, going back to the client with that kind of news, he's going back to his insurance company and being like, "Who did you bring in here to do this kind of thing?" And so, like, what if
Absolutely.
this was a real estate deal? What if they were selling this house? What if somebody else was coming in to buy it and they were like, "Wow, look at this brand new beautiful basement," not knowing that it was full of mold. You hear the stories where people just paint over it, right? And
Yeah,
I
the flip
have
is.
sorry.
Oh, I just said in the home flipping industry
Yeah,
is that's the name of the game, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, and so I just think that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the client is, you can't tell just by looking. This stuff is naked to the eye. It's microscopic when it's floating through the air, right? And so this is something that's really big, and people need to consider it when purchasing a home because um, you air tests are not everything, but they definitely help us see what we can't see with our naked eye, right? Um, and that's the thing. And again, I understand, from an agent's viewpoint that it's not always, it can be a deal breaker, and but at the end of the day, it's a precaution that really, really, really needs to be taken. I think anyways. But
Oh,
one more thing I wanted to add
100%.
on that is building materials, how they're stored, when you're building, when you're pre to building, before building, how they're stored, the materials we're using. I was called out to a job a week ago or so, and sure enough, we went in, and it was a real estate purchase. And the big concern was that the home inspector had, when inspecting the unfinished basement, had noticed that there was what looked like microbial substance on the sheathing of the ceiling. There's no drywall; it was just plywood. And so, sure enough, I was going in to test all of that, observe it, give my opinion on it, and run some air tests. We did some tape lifts on the surface sampling side, and took everything to the lab. Sure enough, it came back, everything was positive, right? And so they had a decision to be made, right? I mean, it's totally, and it was the whole basement. It wasn't just one section. It was the whole basement ceiling, right? And so the thing is that, I mean, especially you want to be very cautious on this side, because it could be very easily remediated, right? But then you start to think to yourself as well, right? If this is what we can see, what this was a 2-year-old home. So what's behind the walls, right? What's behind the walls? If this is what they did with the plywood, right? And it's full of mold, you know, what about the studs, everything, the plywood, everything, all the building materials behind the walls that we can't see? Are we going to rip down the drywall? You can't really do that, because this is a home that you haven't purchased yet, right? Um, Drew, coming from the construction industry, maybe you can touch on this a little bit. What are your thoughts on this? Because I know this is a big issue in North America, and how we're storing our materials, how we're building with our materials, and trying to avoid mold growth, and making sure, I mean, I have heard from other videos and watching and listening that, checking your wood for moisture is a big thing as well. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is. It is one of the biggest things. You see a new home being built, and through delays, maybe it's a small crew. It takes a long time, and that building is sitting out there. The subfloor's getting soaked. Maybe it's getting snowed on. Not to mention, you got to be really selective when you're buying your lumber and checking it. If you're building your home or doing a remodel, you'll hear it commonly just called as lumber mold. And a lot of contractors, they don't even hardly cite, some guys don't even cite or crown boards, let alone inspect it for lumber mold. But let's say you don't, you put that stud that's already full of mold from the lumber yard because it sat out or was it dried improperly or not handled correctly. You put it in your wall assembly, you sheetrock it, insulate it, run your wires, your ducts, you put your home all together. What's that going to do in 5 to 10 years? So we got to be very very critical of the materials that are going into our builds, inspecting your lumber, like you said, making sure it was kiln dried properly, that you're not putting in wet lumber, and just really people need to be more critical of the materials going into their homes. And if let's say before you get a house, you frame it, you sheet it, um, before you get it totally dried in, it gets soaked. Are you going to be, the contractor should be bringing in fans, checking for mold growth and development, and dealing with it should you have a problem. But a lot of times, people just don't worry about it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's going to be a huge problem, uh, you know, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, when it could have been addressed, before mechanicals are in, electricals in, drywalls in. Those things are easy to fix in at the right process. So as soon as your home gets dried in, you need to be hiring an inspector like Mike, who's knowledgeable about mold growth, how to detect it, what signs to look out for, and deal with it at that point before you progress. And you don't see a lot of people do that.
No, they don't. And you know, that's one of the things too is I respect the, stay in your lane kind of procedure. Yeah. I like to operate in a lot of different areas, just like you, Drew. But I think that when it comes to mold, um, I really stick to my lane. I don't make holes in walls, right? I don't. I usually lean on a remediation team, remediation experts, right, to help to determine a lot of that stuff. And so that's where, like, coming into a situation like that, number one, it's a real estate deal, a million plus, right? And
Mhm.
you I mean, it's one of those things, you're really taking a chance. So you got to look at all the factors, right? Yeah, it's a brand new home. Um, absolutely. But I mean, I've been in a lot of homes too where, it's common policy and practice for me when doing an inspection that if I do find mold in multiple areas of the home, it doesn't have to be a new home. It doesn't have to be an old home. The condition of the home is always something you're considering, right? But there's no precursor for this type of stuff. And when you're finding mold in multiple areas, depending on the situation, it usually is in the best interest of the client to have a full mold inspection completed on the home before purchase. And a lot of times, I will pass that off and refer them to a company that can do that for them, right? um, a company like our good friend Jonathan Farrar that will come in from JF Healthy Homes. Jonathan, salute. For
Absolutely.
to take over something like this and help to identify a lot of the hidden areas, right? And I think that's really essential, because again, you're buying a home that's a million plus, right? This is a big purchase, and it's something that, the average home inspector, it's right in our InterNACHI contracts. This is not a mold inspection, right? So I mean, it's still something that, I take upon my shoulders as a home inspector, as a building biologist, whatever hat I'm wearing on that day, to be looking at.
Mike, a good trick you were just talking about not cutting drywall. And if you kill the power to the circuit, let's say you got a problem area by a window or exterior wall or wherever, if you can access an outlet, kill the power. And if you have a bore scope, usually you can twist one of those tabs and sneak your bore scope in that wall cavity to at least, get eyes on that problem area. I recently bought a bore scope, so I've been going around and just finding holes to, check out what's going on, and it's pretty shocking what you find, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
I just
nothing
purchased
but
I
trouble.
purchased one a couple months back. Yeah, one of the I added a little bit to the collection here recently, and I
Yeah.
invested in a gas sniffer. So I think it's a part of air
Nice.
quality. I again, staying in your lane is a big thing, right? But you're doing an air quality inspection. A lot of clients will ask, like, did you check for gases, right? And so, it's in the fine print of the report, or that we're not gas technicians, right? We're it's just a general air quality test, but I think that's another area that we need to start looking, because gases can be very harmful, right? It could be a sewer gas, it could be natural gas, propane. Yeah. So I mean, these are all big
CO.
things. Yep, 100%. Yeah, and it's you
I
get
mean,
a. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, adding that service on when you're already in the house. When I was a fireman, in the wintertime, people's furnaces, their flues, if they had gas appliance, a gas furnace, you have no idea how many time the wind direction would shift, snow would block the vent. We would show up with our, four gas, check it out. And there was a few times where we had to evacuate the homes because literally the people, if they, wouldn't have had a CO detector, called us, it could have killed them. It's one of those things that's very serious when it starts to affect you. the carbon monoxide binds to your red blood cells and replaces the oxygen. The only treatment, you have to go to the ER and they'll give you methylene blue, which is one of the things that's really popular in the health world today. Um, but it's a very, very serious thing. So it's awesome that you're adding that service on to check that
Yeah.
out for people, because
Yeah.
it kills quite a few people a year.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is that, it definitely, like, you have to make sure that the client understands that this is not, we're not gas technicians, we're not replacing gas technicians, we're not licensed for gas checking. This is just a precautionary thing that we're doing just to add to the service, and right, and we make sure to put that in our reports. But again, yeah, it's something that I think is very, very, very important, just because I mean there are so many different types of gases that can be present in a home that can make people feel sick. And again, gases are not always, like a sewer gas, you can definitely smell it, right? But there's a lot of gases that don't have an odor, right? Um, Man, it'd be nice if these gas sniffers
SEO.
picked up radon gas.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Absolutely,
for
right?
sure. For sure.
But yeah, so that's something that we've recently started doing, and we surprisingly have been working a lot as well with TO15 canister tests for VOCs, where it actually helps us to break down the different volatile organic compounds, and it helps us to be more precise with what's in the air that could be causing air quality issues as well. And again, that's a lab driven test, that, I mean, we're down here in Canada, but seems like our lab EMSL, they are actually, their head offices are, I think, are throughout the US, and so a lot of our testing goes down to the US, for the labs down there. But yeah, that's something we're seeing an increased presence of as well. Is the TO15 tests, and I think that's important as well, right? Like, lab tests are always going to be one step better in terms of, air quality tests. We have the monitors we put out. I have 10 monitors now that we put out around the house. It helps us to measure the carbon dioxide, VOCs, formaldehyde, particulates, your general air quality testing, right? It gives you a general idea of the air quality that you're breathing in. And then again, we do the gas sniffer test, we do the micron particle testing. So by the end of all the testing that we do, right, it really does give us a good idea as to what kind of air quality we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Mike, I was going to ask you, we just recently bought a Jasper air filter, and it was between Jasper and I want to say Austin Air. I couldn't decide. I was wondering what are some of your favorite air filters. We also have
Yeah,
some air doctors that I
yeah,
really like
absolutely.
because they're low.
So 100%. All three of those are really good, right? I think when it comes down to it, a couple of them might have an advantage over each other, but I think when it comes down to it, the one that I usually push the most is definitely the Jasper. I like the fact that it comes with a lifetime warranty. I like the fact that it has a um carbon filter on it, so it helps to filter out some of the VOCs and the formaldehyde that will be going through the air as well. If you Jasper particularly really prides himself on cleaning the air of mold spores, right, and particles. I think they help to get down to, I think is it 0.3 microns. It might be even less. I'm not sure. I can't remember the specifics of it, but um, some of the better. That's where I think, buying the right air purifier for your home. Sometimes it might cost you an extra $300-400, but I think it's definitely something that I would consider if you have a respiratory issue, or if you're just, you want to make sure your home is safe and that you're getting good quality air, for yourself, your family, your children. Because I think that when it comes down to it, you can go to Home Depot and you can buy air purifiers, and yeah, they will help a little bit, right? But I think that when it comes down to it, looking at cleaning the air, you want to do, it's the same thing if you put on a a crap filter on your furnace, right? It's going to catch the big stuff, but a lot of the small stuff is still going to pass through, right? And you know, the Jasper, usually one of the other things that I really like about these higher end, hospital grade or medical grade air purifiers is that they usually do a really good job of cleaning not just one room, but if you put it in the hallway upstairs outside the bedrooms, it really helps to make a big difference. And that's the difference really between buying these little tiny air purifiers. And a lot of times I go into people's homes and, they'll tell you like, oh yeah, I got the air purifier. And you look at it and it's like this little tiny thing that's like, a foot tall. And it's like, sure, that's great. It's better than nothing. Right. And let's work on that. Let's see. And some homes have different levels of micron and particle measurements, right? So I mean, we look at that as well when we make our recommendations, but it's standard. It just like Ethernet and Ethernet instead of Wi-Fi in the electromagnetic field world, it's standard to have a good air purifier, right? I mean, make sure you clean your ducts, clean your put in good filters into your furnace. But again, it's
And
standard.
change your furnace filters regularly,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. It's like a good toothpaste that
How
protects your
many
teeth.
people forget that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean these are all really, really good things that we help customers with or clients with. And a lot of it is education, right? If you hire a professional to come in to do a job, give them the time to educate you on the subject because that's why we're there. And for me, anyways, that's what I really pride my work in is, um, giving the client my time to be able to understand what it is, why we're there, to fix any issues. But education on these subjects goes a long way, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things.
Absolutely. And it always goes back to the analogy, when humans get sick, how often, other than building biologists, building scientists, guys like us, how often would you hear a doctor or anybody think about their environment? Yet if your, pet fish is sick, do you change out the tank of the water or do you treat the fish? Instantly, everybody always, when it comes to animals or like livestock, well, what are they eating? What have they been exposed to? Is there mold in their hay? But humans, we very rarely, go to the environment. Well, maybe you're living in a toxic house. You never open up your windows. You have mold, and you're getting blasted with, RF radiation from the cell tower right next door. Maybe it's maybe you need to change your environment a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I tell you, it's interesting, but every trip that I go through, or sorry, every trip to a doctor's office, I make note of it to quiz the doctor on what they think of these subjects. And they never really elaborate, right? It's always, oh, not enough, not enough testing done. It's inconclusive. It's not. And if you look at the symptoms, like I have a symptoms questionnaire that I usually go through with clients before I start. And if you look at the symptoms and look at how, you know, casually they are similar to a lot of different things that a lot of people are maybe experiencing, um, it's something that I think that, gets, they drop the ball on it, right? Because I get headaches. I have, rashes, itchy skin, like I wake up, my airways are blocked, right? My child is not breathing properly. In his sleep he's heaving, right? Like all these different types of things, right? And you know, doctors are not going to start where you need to start. And I think, Like we're house doctors, right? That's what we are. We come into your home and we look for these things, right? Doctors don't do that, right? Doctors will sit there, listen to you, what your symptoms are, and prescribe. That's what doctors do, right? So I think when it comes down to it, a lot of it has to be a combination of, right? And I think that doctors really need to open themselves up to in a way that they're starting to take this stuff seriously, because also when it comes down to it, you look at, builders, right? Builders are starting to listen, starting to, right? And using, healthy building materials, um, healthy building practices, right? They're starting to listen, and that's a good thing. But still, it's not enough, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take more of us to really put pressure on these types of areas, right? And I wouldn't consider myself a expert in building. I would consider myself, I know a lot more about, electromagnetic fields and mold and air quality and best practices and testing methods and stuff like that. But I think that, Drew, like, I think one of the greatest things would be to have a guy like you on site when we're going through these building processes, because I think that you have to be able to talk the same language, and when I was doing the Ethernet job recently with the electricians and the client, um, it was a combination of both professions, the electrical profession and the building biology world, to bring the client into the best practices. And it's really difficult for the building biologist and the electrician because we come from different worlds. We come from worlds, we use different lingo, we use different languages, we're trained differently. So communication is really, it's key when working in between professions, right? It's like the plumber, that has to work alongside, you know, the the general contractor, or the plumber that has to work alongside the electrician, right? And there's challenges there. Exactly. There's challenges there, right? So it comes down to ethical procedure, communication, planning, right? Um, all of these things are major, major impacts on the building world.
Mike, I was very happy to see. I don't know if you're familiar. You were kind of talking about the building movement, and in the past 10 years, you've seen a big push in America for, I'm sure Canada too, but for passive house. The first iteration of green building, where it was all energy efficiency, building a passive house, a tight house with no consideration for the occupancy health. And one of the kind of the main guys here in America is Matt Risinger. He's got a huge build network. I think he calls it the Build Show. I followed him for 10 years, and slowly, as from our work we're doing and getting the word out, he just put out a podcast this month about his new home and how he built a healthy home. And he wasn't quite to building biology standards, but he was getting a lot of things right. And I was very happy to hear that podcast and hear him talk about those issues, because, he is probably the preeminent kind of most popular builder, million subscribers on YouTube, big channel. And, if he's talking about these issues, I guarantee pretty soon on his podcast or the Build Show Network, they're going to start having building biologists, and to take
Yeah,
it to that next level. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
if you're building
100%.
a healthy home and focusing on indoor air quality, how about we take it up another level and we include, we're hardwiring our homes. And, because there are builders out there that are truly trying to be the best. And, if clients are coming to them and if their requests are, well, hey, if I'm building the best home, these are my non negotiables and this is what I want. Well, builders are going to start implementing that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's something that's really, really important. Yeah, and again, um, so there's certain things, right? So like for example, the client contacts me to come in to do the Ethernet job. I hire the electrician to come in to work alongside me to perform that transaction, right?
Hmm.
Um, it would be nice to see. So at that time, I become the general contractor. I become the hiree of the talent, right?
Yep.
It would be nice to see the builders, when building, bring in a building biologist to as experts in the
Absolutely.
field, right? It would be nice to see more of that, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to the client and what the client wants and what the client needs, right? But I tell you, it would be a lot easier to set up a home to install Ethernet cables when the home is being first built than when it is already up and standing and the drywall's up,
Yep.
right? And because it can be very
And a lot
invasive.
cheaper too.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Um and it's yeah, I just find that if it's planned from the beginning, it's a lot easier. And I'm finding that, a lot of new built homes, they're doing exactly that. They're running the cables, right? They're running the cables.
Yep.
It's there when they move in, and that's really good to see.
Yep.
Um,
And
that
if
yeah,
most people have never been in an EMF free environment, we're so exposed to RF with smart appliances, Wi-Fi routers that when people experience it, it is so worth the minor inconvenience. And most times when you're on the internet, you're stationary. You're not walking around your house, doing something on your laptop. You're sitting down, so plug in.
yeah,
You're sitting on your
100%.
phone, you can
Yep,
also plug in.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that's the best way. That's the best way to do it, right? Like, if you think about it, if you're sitting at your laptop, right, you're being blasted all day long by the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, right? And a lot of people don't realize what that
Oh,
does, right, or how it affects us. And I think that's the natural part of education and showing people just how easy it is to make that change.
I used to think, because I get migraine headaches pretty frequently, a lot less lately, and I could never figure it out when I would sit at a certain computer at our house. It was an old MacBook. I had it into a power strip, which I didn't know back then. Um, but I was just, once I got my meter and measured, because I would always sit there editing videos, I have a YouTube channel. And if I sat there over an hour without fail, I would end up with a migraine. And after testing that with my meter, it's a no brainer. You look at what you're being exposed to when you actually have a meter and can measure it, and you think that some people, maybe at their office, sit there all day long being bombarded. And then not only that, let's say they're sitting under fluorescent lights in an office building, which actually transmit, RF through the air in extremely high levels of dirty electricity or magnetic fields. It's like, it's no wonder why people go to their job and just feel terrible by the end of the day because we're essentially slowly killing them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, really. Um, I think just planning, coordinating, educating, these are all like really good tools, you know, to help a client through, to help them get from point A of their project to, the end. But Drew, I wanted to really thank you for coming on today. I think we touched on some really good topics, and I think we expanded on some really good points from our last episode conversation that we had, and I'm gonna make sure that I get this one up here as soon as possible for people to listen to because I think there's a lot of really good content that people when they're driving in their cars listen to these types of podcasts because it's going to help you to educate yourself on the best practices of of making a healthy home, creating a healthy home for yourself, for your family, for your kids. And again, for those listening, you could always reach out to us. Drew, how can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Elevate Eco Institute. I also have a YouTube channel that I'm going to be posting our full remodel on our office, trying to help train, your DIY homeowner crowd into how to, implement some of these policies and procedures, how to wire up Ethernet RJ45s, how to run Ethernet cables with glow sticks, how to apply some of these finishes, all things
That's it.
building biology. I'm gonna start cranking out those videos geared towards your kind of DIY crowd. So I'm really excited about that.
Fantastic. That's great. Um, okay, fantastic, Drew. Well, it was really nice having you on, and perhaps we can do this again one day soon. Thank you for your time, and I'm sure everybody's going to love this episode.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mike, thank you again for having me on, and thanks for always being such a awesome resource and mentor. Anytime I have questions, I always reach out to Mike because I'm new to the building biology field, and he's always very gracious with his time and spends umpteen hours. Oh, I would do it this way or use this material, or so. I really appreciate it, Mike.
You're very welcome, Drew. It's my pleasure. Okay, Drew, you take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Okay, take care. Ciao.
Later.